Harbord by Kenneth Waldron. Manly 2095. Narrated by David Tredinnick. Moving to Harbord, now officially back to its original name, Freshwater, was a big change in my life. When we had made the long trek on weekends to check on the house building process, there was little time to learn about the area. The beach was only 100 yards or so away, but I'm not sure if I had ever been there. Now it was very accessible. My parents, no doubt, expected I would view this as paradise, but that is not quite the way it was. I could not swim, and the surf was very intimidating. The kind of waves we called dumpers would slam you into the sand. At first all the waves looked the same to me, and the surf was a very scary place. All of the other local kids could swim, and that ability was rather taken for granted. I refused to take swimming lessons since it would have meant being in the same class with 3 or 4-year-olds, which was more than my fragile 7-year-old ego would stand. It took some time, but I eventually taught myself to swim, although I was never very good at it. My introduction to Harbord Public School was not a happy one. I was placed in first class, the same level I had been in Ashbury Public School. I was one of the very youngest in the class because my February birthday came only a couple of weeks before the beginning of the school year, and I had the monumental disadvantage of joining the Harbord class well into the school year. First class at Harbord was a much bigger group than at Ashbury and was held in a rather dilapidated weatherboard classroom. It was presided over by Mrs. Bullock, who was an older lady and quite intimidating to me. There was a school bus. This was a regular 2-decker government bus that was assigned to pick up children at a set time and transport them to the school. The destination sign said, "School Special." If we missed the bus, we could walk to school, or home again. It was not so far, maybe half a mile, but it seemed to be a long way. A year or so after joining the school, I was promoted out of the infant school to the primary school. This was actually just a different part of the same school, but in primary school, boys and girls were in different classes. The boys' classes were taught by male teachers who used the cane for discipline. We learned writing using steel-nibbed pens and open ink bottles. Writing was always my nemesis. My scrawl was untidy, and I had trouble with the pen, leading to blots on the page which I would try, ineffectually, to remove using an eraser. One day, I remember, we were having a writing class and the deputy headmaster walked in. He was upset over something and started walking around the room inspecting each boy's work. When he came to me and saw my blotted scrawl, he launched into a tirade and sent me to stand behind the door, pending further punishment. After inspecting the rest of the class, he stormed out, leaving me trembling behind the door. Eventually, I asked our teacher if I could sit down. From an adult vantage point, it is obvious that the headmaster was upset with our teacher for some reason, but it was a scary experience for an 8-year-old. I recently went back to Harbord. Where our house used to be is now part of the campus of the Harbord Diggers Club. We lived on a little dead-end street called Minnie Street. Minnie Street has ceased to exist, along with all the houses along it. The Diggers Club itself is now partly dug into the headland. Above it is a retirement community. There are 3 blocky 2- or 3-storey buildings and a pretty green lawn above the club, plus a row of smaller buildings along the drive, which was the street behind our house. When we moved to Harbord, we had a refrigerator, but many of our neighbours did not. Next door was an older weatherboard house with verandas on 2 sides. They still used an icebox. This was a chest with a compartment on top to hold a big block of ice, and a little chest below it where you put your food to be kept cool. There was a tray underneath to collect the meltwater from the ice. If one forgot to empty that tray, there would be a flood. The iceman came every morning to deliver a block of ice. The only heating for the house in winter was a cosy stove in the lounge room. This was a cast iron box with a grate on which coke was burnt. There was a tray under the grate to catch the ashes. A door on the front was used to set the whole thing up, and a smaller door near the top was where one could feed in more coke. The stove was connected via a flue to the chimney. Lighting the fire was quite a performance. Newspaper was crumpled and placed on top of the grate. Pieces of wood were put on top of the paper. Coke went on top of all that. The paper was lit, and one hoped that the burning paper and wood would ignite the coke. The coke came from the gasworks, where there were coke ovens to convert coal into coke and coal gas. Coal gas was piped around the neighbourhood to fire gas cooking stoves. There was no natural gas supply in those days. I recently went to the site of the gasworks at Little Manly. That is all gone, of course. Now it is a lovely public park, except for a circular scar that was the site of the gasometer that held the gas before it was piped out. The end.